I'm your host, Dion Abrams, and as you can see, my guest this evening is Brother TACUMA OGUNSEYE. And as usual, we're going to be talking about current issues in the political and social landscape of Guyana. I want to welcome you to the program, Brother TACUMA OGUNSEYE.
Okay, as always, as usual, it's a pleasure to be here.
I think we should begin again by expressing our solidarity with the HGP Channel 9, White Black Man Channel 9, because of the continuous attack by an agency that is supposed to be impartial and representing the fairness in terms of and objectivity in terms of how it deals with media in Guyana. But this station is continuously under attack by the media monitoring unit, and it's every program basically that deals with issues that are germane to the political and social landscape in Guyana. The station continues to be written to. The objective seems to be that none of these programs should be allowed to be on air. The same thing is not happening for the other stations. The government has the liberty to say what they want. Nandalal and Jack Dio and all of them can say what they want. So freedom of the press is under attack in Guyana. Censorship in the crudest manner is being exercised, and so we're calling on the nation to be alert and to be willing, as we said on the last program, to be actively engaged should any attempt be made to sanction the operations here. This is the voice of the people. We have no other avenue except for social media, and this wanton attack is one to be decried loudly and vociferously. Brother Ogun.
Yes, I want to join with you in solidarity with the station. This is a direct, unwillful, bad-minded, spiteful attack on Channel 9. It is something that the PPP have been doing for many years, and it is a direct response and is part of the comprehensive program to marginalize the African voice and African political, social, economic, and cultural expressions in the country. And everybody knows that this is a major channel as it relates to African matters. So it is wider than trying to marginalize the political opposition. It is a direct attack on the African community. And we got to call a spade a spade. And it is part of the comprehensive policy of domination, not only political, economic, social, cultural, in the media, every area. There seems to be on a march to dominate us. And we have to begin to prepare ourselves in the country for major pushback in defense of this channel and in defense of all the onslaught that we have been subject to. There is no other channel in this country. And to be more specific, there's no PPP channel that the Broadcasting Authority is cited for alleged violations, and they are piling up accusations against the station over and over in trying to whitemail the station into a position that will allow them to impose the penalties that they wish to impose, and with the ultimate intention to close the station down. And we have to make it clear that it is in the interest of the African community to see that this don't happen. And if they want to turn the defense of Channel 9 into a wider African problem and conflict, the choice is theirs. But we have to guarantee that if the repression of the station continue, we will have no other choice but to call upon our people to make a political defense of the station, both in Guyana, in the region, and the rest of the world. So if they want to make this into a wider political conflict, the calling is on them.
You see, it's part, you hit the nail on the head, because it's part of the racist nature of the regime. I noticed that a recent announcement has been made by The Guardian that they are setting up in the Caribbean and in Latin America also new agents to work with the station, to work with the media outfit, to focus on racism. And specifically Guyana was mentioned as a target for that. And so issues like these, we have to get the Guardian to highlight, so that people across the world can understand the nature of the deep-seated racism that exists in this country and the whole idea of domination. We're not going to allow ourselves to continue to be under this kind of suppression. And people are rising up across the world for this kind of thing. Africa is a clear example. Domination by the Europeans is now being challenged. And I don't see why we as a people in Guyana should sit and allow them to dominate us, violate our rights. I mean, they even target the people who are in the social media. Kidaki, Sister Rhonda Lane, the young lady from Nabaklis. And, so they have a direct their aim is to silence every African voice that can raise issues that are pertinent to the African community. And we should not sit and
see, on one hand, they're boasting that they have been boasting that they have made significant inroads into the African community. Mm-hmm. And I have never find them demonstrating the kind of weakness that they're demonstrating, because the way they're behaving as it relates to the African independent media is not a display of a political party and a political leadership that is confident that it has made inroads into the opposition strongholds. Their response is more a panic response. And in fact, there's an admission that they're not comfortable with the present situation, and that they're becoming aware that the policies of repression and oppression would eventually lead to a resistance, and I think that they're worried about that. So they're not, as much as they're trying to play that they're bullies, in the bullyism they're demonstrating the dialectics of it, their weakness.
Anyhow, we will continue to raise the issue here. We'll raise it on the Politics 101, wherever because this must become a major campaign, a major campaign of public awareness, so that the world can understand that there is no freedom of the press in Guyana. And this is nothing new. Jack Dew had banned journalists from going to his press conference and all of these things. So every time the media, which is supposed to be the watchdog of the people in relation to the government and so on, every time the media tries to do the job that they should be doing, they come under some kind of sanction by the administration. And it's part of, the despotic nature of the Jack Dew regime. But I mean, Dr. Roger Luncheon passed his funeral roselle. You mentioned that you possibly would not have attended. I had no intention of attending. Did you go to the funeral?
No, I didn't. And this is why I want to make it public, because I did indicate it to the viewers that I'm weighing the pros and cons, you know, and I explained why I had hesitation, and I explained that myself and Roger live in the same community, and they, apart from our political relations, they had, you know, social and community relations. And a normal scope of things, you know, it is just correct that you attend the funeral. But after, as I said on the last program, after hearing Jack Dio, when he was speaking at the night of reflection for Roger, when he raised all kinds of issues, and you know, he made the famous remark that Roger had gone to his grave with secrets, and that he too will be going to his grave with secrets, and he was hinting at the crisis the country faced during the you know, 2002-2006 situation. And I didn't want to subject myself to that. But so I just decided that, look, as much as I wanted to honor Roger as a fellow citizen and a fellow community member and a political colleague, I really didn't want to subject myself to Jack Dio's utterances. So I didn't go. So, you know, I want to report to the nation I didn't go.
All right. Well, but of course we have our respect.
Yes, as the last time we pay our tributes, right, and our respect and our condolences to his family and so forth.
But unfortunately, the political conditions were not right for us to be part of his passing. But coming out of those discussions from the funeral and prior to that, this situation, 2002-2006, a number of issues, we talked about some of those issues last week, but it's bringing to the fore information that suggests a number of things. What concerns do you have about the utterances of Jack Dio and
yeah. Okay, I think Jack Dio used the occasion of the luncheon's funeral, both the reflection and the funeral, to raise the matter of the crime spree. Mm-hmm. And you know, Randolph Prasad is the paid propaganda czar.
Okay. And
I was reading an article in the Demerara Wave, a feature article. Apparently he's now being featured in the Demerara Wave, and he had an article there where it was captioned the Guyana insurgency, and basically he was piggybacking on Jack Dio, who said that it wasn't a crime spree but an insurgency, and Prasad was given an explanation to justify Jack Dio's reason. You know, and I read the article, and it is striking at the kind of narrative that they're trying to portray. Now, everybody know, or ought to know, that the origin of the crime spree, and for the record for Randolph Prasad, it is the government itself that deemed it a crime spree. So for them now to say it wasn't a crime spree, it was an insurgency, okay, is interesting, because they defined it as a crime spree at a time when other people were pointing to the politics of it, which we will probably address just now. But he was defending Jack Dio's logic, and everybody knew that the origin of that problem lies in the rise of extrajudicial killings by the Guyana state as it was reflected in the police force, Guyana police force. And later, as it was reflected in the competition among the drug lords for turf. It is those two factors that propel the situation. But it is the government handling of the situation, or the government mishandling of the situation, which led it to develop the way in which it developed. But the government having mishandled the situation began to blame the opposition as being responsible for the problem. And we had two narratives. It's a crime spree. I remember myself and somebody like and Barrington Braffett, we were arguing that, look, this thing is not just simply a crime spree. This is a political matter that they arrive from the points that I made, from the government encouraging the police to execute young black people, and the war between drug lords for turf. And the convergence of those two things were the root cause of the problem. And the government, in siding with the drug lords and in siding with the police and encouraging these executions, was acting politically. And we argue that in that sense, it was a political problem, and that those who were responding to the politics of the government. And their line of argument for the years was that this is a crime, it's nothing to do with politics. But now Jack Dio suddenly wake up, and he's now want to reinvent the government narrative and saying, look, the truth of the matter, this thing was not really a crime spree, it was an insurgency. It was an attempt directed to overthrow the government. But when he argues the insurgency, he means it was directly an attempt to overthrow the government. And when you read Randolph Posada, no linkage with the root cause of the problem. He just started as a propaganda czar, trying to make propaganda.
Why are you making him a czar? A czar, that title does not befit the man. So he's a propagandist.
He's a propagandist, but he's the major propaganda man at the moment.
For them.
For them. Yes, he's the major propaganda man for the moment. But what I find interesting is that all of a sudden they're inserting the political aspect of the problem, but they want to do it not recognizing that as you discuss the problem, they're going to indict themselves further and further. Because apart from the mishandling of the thing initially, when the thing gets worse, they side the drug lords. And we had the Rajakan thing where the army and the police find him with the electronic equipments. And the one had the president complaining that the army misled them and gave them wrong information, wasn't collaborating. Well, those are matters he got to know. But it is public information that the army also knew about the government involvement in this from day one. And if the army knew the government involvement, if the army decided not to treat it as a legitimate problem where the army have to be even take the government line, then the government has to accept some responsibility, because you lose the faith in the army and some sections of the army, basically because they must have had this knowledge. If they stop Roger Lange, they stop a PPP agent with these sophisticated equipments, the evidence showed in the U.S. court that Ramsamy was the person who imported the equipment. Yeah, okay. The equipment was lodging with the army. So the government's involvement in the problem was well established, and they can't just want to finger other people, they finger the opposition, condemn elements in the army who they feel didn't support them, without recognizing that as a government, when problems develop, you have to handle it. The way you handle it, okay, or the way you don't handle it, okay, is in itself a political action. And if you start by denying the politics of it originally, now years after it suits you, okay, to discuss the politics of it, well, you open the door for all kinds of examination. And one would have hoped that as a government, they would have had good sense to help push the country past that, but Jagdeo seems to want to reopen all of these things to discussion.
But when Jagdeo does these things, he has an objective in mind. Yeah. His mouth, he has no lid on his mouth, and so what do you feel, what do you think is underlying reasons? I mean, not in his head, but objectively, as a political analyst, why do you think he's trying to change the narrative at this point in the political sphere of the country?
I'm not certain I could give a response because I'm still trying to come to grips with it. Mm-hmm. But, Jagdeo is known for, as much as he's a politician, and he's no mean politician, but he also known to be careless and to, do things that is not well thought out. And I think this is probably one of the times when it wasn't well thought out. In fact, I didn't see it, but a person was telling me that when he was speaking and he was going down a certain line, Ramatar was in the audience in front, turning hand, telling close, tone down. You go, but I didn't see it for myself, but I was very reliably informed. But I don't know. It might be one of these things. But I went out of my way to listen to his speech at the funeral. And in fact, what he threatened at the reflection to do at the funeral, he didn't do.
Okay.
He didn't do, and he said, okay, you can leave it for next time. Probably this is not the right place. So you're not too sure what's going on in his head, So it's hard to answer the question, but he probably had something in mind. But somebody must have told him, you're going down a road that it may not make good sense for stupid,
are. Okay. Anyway, you lived through that period. I mean,
you lived village
in Boxer, and I would have been really happy if it were an insurgency rather than a crime spree, because if it were an insurgency, then where are the political collateral damages out of that incident? The only political agent that was killed is Saxon, and up to now they can't give a reason. They don't want to have an inquiry done. The family is still calling for that, and Jagdeo has to answer to why it is that they have sought by every means to cover the Saxon situation.
Well,
but he's not dealing with that.
It's interesting. I don't want to. There's all kinds of narrative around this killing, but you're quite right. It's one of the ministers.
Yeah.
They have the instrument to the state. They must have unraveled something, and they owe it to the country and to more so to the family and the sad souls to say what they know. And the fact that they can't do it for their own comrade. They are coming off good, because I mean, if your narrative is that, look, this man was killed by the quote unquote the criminals, quote unquote the insurrectionists, whatever you want to describe at a particular time, then it is easy for the government to expose the findings on the involvement of these elements in the Sadsar killing. And if for some reason they're not doing that, it opens the doors that what people may think it was, it wasn't. Yeah. And I think that is what worrying Sadsar family. That, there are elements in the equation that, the family doesn't seem to believe could be explained by the narrative that the government half-heartedly seek to explain that he was a victim of the crime spree.
Because remember Bacchus, right down the road here, who had promised to come out and to speak.
His mind and the truth.
His mind and to
never got a chance to speak.
So
and
it wasn't the
it wasn't the insurrectionists who took care of him.
Right?
So this equation, he got a lot of. So Jagdeo is raising up a whole set of answers, but he has to know.
Right.
He has to know.
So I don't know, but the man is a real fool as far as I can see. Because he don't, like I said, his mouth just goes.
Sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
He talks,
Right.
and sometimes he just...
He doesn't know.
He doesn't think everything out too
right, clearly what he says.
Yeah.
I mean, he acts on the spur of the moment and he believes it, but he lets the cat out of the bag so often. He should be more prudent, smart, because you think he is, but he's not. Right?
See, power the thing corrupts you, know. It gets to you and then you believe all kinds of things about you. Invincibility and all kinds of things, you know.
Yeah, well, he has that way because, like we've saying that he and the likes of Nandalal, they even use the media in however they want, and they use events, public events, to say whatever they want, and it seems as though nobody is willing to criticize them. And when you raise these concerns, they're only programs like these we can talk about them. And then we talk about them now, they're saying that we are speaking and are expressing opinion as fact. I don't know, we have to qualify every statement. We say that it's my view, it's my opinion, I believe, and so on and so on and so on. But we're not going to go down that road.
We're in a classroom. That's being indoctrinated in a classroom, doctrination.
Right.
You know, the man want to indoctrinate you, you know, public. He want to determine how public discourse
should be
took place in the country, man. It wasn't King and son.
So essentially, Randolph Passad doesn't make sense in terms of what he's trying to do in support of Jack Deal. And people really should understand that. The fact is, like I said, a lot of the agents who were involved in that, and you see the government side of the whole thing, because people who were commenting in a certain way, people like Ronald Waddell and so on, eventually became victims, and we have no doubt that they were victims of the state. All right? So, this idea that, you know, this whole thing was somehow the government was not involved. Jack Dio now is saying that they were involved, and so a lot of what they would have done, they have to go to their graves with. Right? But people were saying from the inception that they were involved.
Yeah.
And every time there is a jailbreak now, even the last jailbreak, where they had this guy from Buxton, what they call him, not paper sharks, but he escaped from the Mazaruni prison, and people are saying that they lose the man. All right, he was supposed to be part of that same Bartica massacre and all of these things. That they lose the man, and the objective of releasing him is so that they can eliminate him. All right, so the trust, you know, that people have of the state is not one that is of any good. People are still seeing them in the light of that 2002-2006 period, that their activities are still bent on targeting and eliminating people who are against them within the state. And I mean, if we look, but since they came back to power, the Escobar incident, I had raised on Facebook, because the information was given to me that they had recruited some former agents of the military who were trained with a young batch of young recruits, and who were people who left the army, young men who obviously have military knowledge and skill. And they were they had set up a unit basically to target these young people and to eliminate, and Quindon Bacchus fell into that group. The first person who was targeted was a little cousin of mine, an agent of the police force, pretended that he was a businessman having a farm of the Mahaika Creek, and he needed people with security knowledge and skill to go take care and secure his farm. So how he got my cousin's number is still a question. He got it from one of the persons who was part of that clique and who was still in contact with these guys, Quindon and all of these chaps. And so he showed him photographs of all kinds of high-powered weapons, so asked if he can use these and so on. And but my cousin said, I don't know about those things and so on. But eventually they tried to put him into a trap because they wanted to meet him in a similar scenario on a lonely road, but he said, I'm going to meet you at the Buxton gas station. And then they implored upon him to enter the vehicle that the guy had come up with. The guy who initially made the contact, which was a sergeant of the police in the special squad, he didn't show up, but he said he was sending someone. And the person he sent was another agent, including the one that was accused of killing Quindon. And they tried to get him to go into the motor car. He said no. They wanted him to go into the driver's seat next to the police guy who was driving. And he said no. Okay, then eventually he said, okay, I'm going to go into the back. And as soon as he entered the back of the vehicle, it was swarmed. Right? But all of the ammunition and so on, the shells, not shells, but live rounds, were actually in the front seat on the floor where they wanted him to go. But he was at the back of the vehicle. You understand? And then they came up with this old story of him being in possession of live rounds and all kinds of stuff. The matter was thrown out because they couldn't provide any evidence. And the same agent who is now accused of killing Quindon Bacchus tried to get him to open his phone so that they could have possibly deleted all the conversation that he had with this police sergeant and so on. But he never did open the phone. He never got back his phone. Right? And subsequent to his situation at the Buxton gas station, Quindon was set up and assassinated. Right? So they had begun a kind of march to eliminate young African military personnel who had the knowledge. They're no longer in the force, but they still have that knowledge. But I think the response to Quindon's death, and because I made this information public on Dr. Hines' program and so on, and the response had to have them put a halt on that kind of approach to dealing with Africans who have this experience and of whom they're afraid and want to get rid of. So their march, and you can say I'm expressing opinion as fact if you want, but their march to assassinate and to maim and to kill and to drive fear into the African community is not something that is not within their mindset anymore. It's continuing to be a part of their drive to put fear into people. But when people are backed up against the wall, then fear is converted into a different kind of energy. And it is the response that is going to make them understand that fear can be the deadliest agent for those who are under that kind of pressure. But it's really a sad situation. I don't know if you want to...
No, just to make an observation. And in all of these thing. They're using African people.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they believe that they could use African people in this way, and the African community would know. I mean, that's I find it very, very worried. You can't, once you engage, and that's the problem they have from day one. You corrupt a section of the African community to use against the African community, and you expect the African community would know that you're the corruptor and you're behind it. I mean,
it's really a tragedy that these young men, and up to recently I received a report of that the same young man who is an agent of them, that he's now stationed at Edmore, and he was accused of assaulting and beating up somebody, and people were crying for justice. I got that on Facebook, and this young police guy who was part of the military and is now one of their agents in the police force. So he has obviously gotten to a mindset where he believes that he has a clout, that he can conduct himself.
Yeah, he knows that he has the protection of the government, But he may learn that protection is a thing that could disappear. It may be there for a moment, but it could disappear.
But we've had those experiences. I mean, remember we had the gangster experience.
Yeah, the country is full of that experience.
Yes. Gangster, the so-called bad man of the police.
Yeah, but there were no even presidents years after we had to face trials for crimes against humanity and against people. These things here,
One thing I noted, which country was it? But the president went to, I think, France to celebrate his 40th year of rulership. And the people who are from his country and living in that European state got wind of it, and they stormed the place and trashed him, trashed his you see, people believe they can do things and that it will last forever, but it will not. And people will reach a point where they are going to fight back. And despite what they do to this station, what they try to do to African people within this country, they will have resistance. All right? And that resistance, because we were celebrating 1823, but we're not going to allow in this era, I'm making the point that our heads are going to be cut off and put on any stake. Right? It's a different era, and people are not going to allow themselves to be simply mourning a tragedy that they would have been made victims of. So Jack Dio needs to understand that. Right? Now, at the Mautara game, Jack Dio at the conference center speaking to the Amerindians, the Tuchau, is boasting that people are living better. I don't know how and where, and that by 2025, that old age pension will be 40,000, and other things are going to be in store that will be making people's lives better. $40,000. I was reading the Kaituan News today, and there is an argument by a columnist, I don't know, that all of these pensions and benefits are below the minimum wage. Some of them not even half of what the minimum wage is, and people really can survive on them. And Jack Dew is speaking as though $40,000, which is not their promise made to the nation, is something big that he should be proud of.
You know, what I found striking is that, I'm sure my memory hold right. I think in the PPP manifesto, they committed by 2025 to pay $50,000 to pensioner, old age pension. And if it is not directly in the manifesto, it was one of their main campaign points along the election trail. But they had committed to pay by 2025 $50,000. Now that was a time when the inflationary pressures that we are experiencing didn't exist. And now what Jack Joe has the face to stand up and tell the pensioners of this country that you got to wait until 2025 for the pension to reach to 40,000. So you within now and 2025 we're going to put on $7,000 more, $3,000 next year, and the other year $3,000. Now me like a carry to 40,000, you know. It's the 40,000. You know, I really find it as an affront to the poor, and particularly those elderly people who have served this country. Many of them will die before they inherit the $50,000, okay, which, given the kind of oil wealth and oil money that we are getting, and given the amount of money in the government hands, both in terms of revenue and also in terms of resources that they're keeping in the oil fund, could allow them to pay right now $50,000 a month to pensioners. And I want to use the program to say that we, the WPA, and we on this water, Rodney Groundings, will be pressing that in the given circumstances of inflationary pressures, that the government must pay old age pensioners $50,000 a month pension starting from now. We can't wait till 2025 for him to move, for the government to move the pension from 33,000 to 40,000 as stated by the Vice President. You know, the people need relief now. And the elderly people have served this country, you know, beyond doubt. And it is unfair for them to go to the grave without receiving some of this oil money, okay, in a significant increase in pension, when the funds are available. There's no real justification for them not getting this payment now. And we have to begin on every program to find a little 2-3 minutes to remind the country, the government, and the pensioners that we have to be waging this struggle so that the pensioners could get that $50,000 now and not wait until 2025 to get the 40,000 that Jack Dio seems to be walking back the PPP's commitment given in the manifesto, or at least along the campaign trail.
But how is it that these guys reason? Because in his mindset, I mean, Jack Dio, my sense and my understanding is that he came from poor background. But now that he has gotten a basket full of goods, how is it that he cannot relate to the suffering of poor people, so that his entire argument seems to surround the fact that they have moved the pension from 25 to 33, and that is something significant, and you're dealing with a continuous spiraling of prices on the market when you are to take $33,000 to the market. Can it really work for someone to live with over the period of 1 month. For some pensioners, that's all they receive, because a lot of these people that you're dealing with have not been employed in the public sector, and we don't have policing of our private sector to the extent that we ensure that people's NIS and all of these things, and that there are pension schemes available for people in the private sector, so that apart from the government pension, there is something else that they're receiving. All they get is the government's pension. So how is it going around in his head that with all the wealth that you're talking about, that this is something that people should be happy about?
Well, you see, think about power. It corrupts, and it corrupts absolutely. And as kind of political callousness develops into the equation, where the government believe that it is only the government, and by extension Jagdeo has the right to determine who live and who die, who live happy or who live in misery. And he feels that, he has the right to shape national priorities, and that this money, this oil money and government money, is he or the PPP's private property. He, so that he could decide that, look, this section of our society, and it's a multiracial section because the pensionable part of the society is not restricted to Africans or Indians or Malays, multiracial, okay, should not be a beneficiary of $50,000 per month pension out of this oil money. But me, Jagdeo, will give millions, multi-millions to my friends and my cronies, okay, in all kinds of schemes, and write off all kinds of government taxes and all kinds of things, which is really putting money in the hands of those who are beneficiary of the write-off. But he, Jagdeo, has the right, okay, to say to that section of the society who have already served that I deciding in my own judgment. I want to make it more criminal. Jagdeo is economist, so he cannot not understand that money is not determined simply by the number on the paper. It has a relationship with prices, okay, the marketplace, its purchasing power. So he has full knowledge of what $33,000 could buy, okay, and what it can buy. So there's no excuse. It's not economic ignorance. It is political arrogance and political insensitivity that I, as a ruler, call the shots in this place. My priorities is my friends, my cronies, okay, and the private sector elements, and I going to make sure that they are the major beneficiaries of this oil money. Therefore, if they're going to be the major beneficiaries of money, some set of people can do without money. And the people who do without money is the public servants, the workers, the pensioners, unemployed people who could probably be getting some unemployment relief as in some countries, and so forth and so forth. The bulk of the population, okay, would not be a major beneficiary, okay, of this oil money only when I, Jagdeo, decide that they're going to get some crumbs out of this revenue. And that is what, and it is what it is, because unfortunately at present the society is really accepting a lot of the PPP's behavior without adequate resistance. Democracy, for democracy to work, okay, it has to be able to facilitate a level of resistance against excesses. And in our society, the government gets away with imposing excesses on the population, and the population, because it is fundamentally divided by race, okay, and politics, seems not to be able to reach a point of national consensus on some critical things that, look, regardless of who in power, this is some red lines. And if any government cross these red lines, as a nation, we push back. And that's what Guyana is suffering from. There is no red lines. So as the government push, the population absorb the pressure and retreat. The government push, the population, there's no red line. And that is, in my mind, explain why his attitude to pensioners and generally to the poor sections in the community, what it is that he, have made himself the Lord and the God over this oil money and over Guyana, and I, Jagdio, will determine who live, who die, who live in comfort, and who live in misery.
Well, it's a sad state for if that is, your analysis is correct, then it tells a lot about the human thinking. Well, that human thinking, not every human thinks that way, but it doesn't speak well for an economist to be rationalizing in that way and subjecting people to that kind of harsh
arrogance of power.
Yeah, it's really, and you see the arrogance in every public appearance that this guy makes, the way he speaks, the way he deals with issues suggests that I am the authority that nobody else really should question, that I am the embodiment of knowledge and virtue and all of these things. But like we say, we continue to preach. People will only get as much as they're willing to accept. And the call for public resistance is one that must be made, that people have to begin pushing back so that they get what they really what is really due to them. But as long as we're prepared to just sit back and to accept, that this is our lot, that is dictated by Jack Yu and Ashley Singh and those, that this is what we will get. And like you said, it's not a matter of Africans and Indians and Amerindians, because we're all subjected to the same thing. Okay? And a pushback must come at some point, right? The situation continues in relation, and I think this is the last thing we'll deal with, in relation to the opposition and the government meeting to discuss the affairs of the country. The recent Irfan's mouthing that he's available, Rodney can pick up the phone at any time and call him and these kind of things. What was really happening in terms of relations? Is the opposition of any importance in this country in the mind of the president and in the mind of Jagdeep and Nandalal and those?
I think the Jagdeo and Nandalal and the PPP and Ali, the position that they stated during the election, after the election crisis when they came to power, was clear, deliberate, and purposeful. That the opposition has to admit that they rig elections or attempt to rig elections. That was their bottom line. You know, they clearly were prepared to kick the constitution down because the constitution doesn't require the opposition to agree to that in order for the system to work. But that was what they imposed upon the country, and they made it very clear that they would do no business with the opposition until the opposition concede that. But in this more recent story, I was reading in Demerara Wave, I think it was, they had an article which they pointed to an interview that the outgoing U.S. Ambassador Sarah Lynch had on Gordon Mosley's show, where she indicated that the U.S. government was willing to facilitate talks between the government and the opposition. And I think Demerara Wave raised it with Ali. And Ali shunned the whole idea, and as you said, you know, he tried to treat it as a, you know, in a kind of dismissive way, to say, look, Norton could pick up the phone and call me, but in the same breath, he repeating the historical position. I noticed the signal that we got to tie up soon, so I'm being sure we could probably pick it up the next time we could continue. But he signaled that the opposition, you know, will have to shake his hands. The opposition will have to admit that they attempt to rig elections. So on the one hand, he could pick up the phone and call me. On the other hand, he got to shake the hands. The conditions are set. So the basically the bottom line is that they're scared of any US facilitating any discussion between government and opposition, because they know that it will have to be a serious engagement. They seem not to be interested in any serious engagement. And I think that you know, it's unfortunate for the country, but we could pick it up at the next day, because our time.
He wants to run this country by itself.
By himself, yeah.
Yeah, they're interested.
Our time is on us.
In any opposition involvement, because conditions will have to be laid out, and the interest of people
will have to
be looked at. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the program once again, Brother Ogun, and to the viewers out there, I'm happy to be with you again. Talk about these issues that are germane to politics and the life of the country. I look forward to being with you, and I'm sure Brother Ogun is also next week when we have further discussion on these issues. Do have a good night.